What is going on, guys? It's Eclipse here and welcome to today's video where we are looking at one of the more interesting vehicles that I've played in a little while, and it is leading on from one of the tanks that we've done recently, which was the T69, and this is the Tier 9 autoloading tank leading up to the T57 Heavy, and of course it has an autoloader itself. And there's a couple of gameplays that I'm going to showcase, and actually why I think that this tank, it might even be slightly worse than the tier 8 version, and that's after Wargaming have buffed this tank considerably with a few different things like penetration upgrades. They've increased the mobility. I think they classified it now as a heavy tank comparatively to what it used to be. And so yeah, I mean, there's been a few different changes that this tank's received, and although it has received changes, I feel like it kind of still is in the same sort of category that it was at, but it does have a very powerful gun, and that is because this tank has a 4-shot 390 alpha damage gun, being able to do 1560 alpha damage in one clip, which is absolutely mad. And when you think about this tank, it is essentially just a very powerful autoloader at this tier if you can get all your shells out, and that is the main thing. Now, what are we talking about when it comes to the autoloader? So the accuracy of this tank is 0.3, we're running it with full equipment, and I believe we've even got vertical stabilizers in here for the increased accuracy as well. And that means that when we are running with that, we've got 0.3 accuracy, which is pretty okay. I mean, it's up there with some of the better tanks in the game. You've got 8 degrees of gun depression, so you can use your turret to a degree, but we'll get into that in a second. And it also has 2,700 damage per minute, which is pretty good. View range of this vehicle is also very good for a heavy tank with 523 meters, meaning most tanks that you come up against you can at least spot back when they shoot at you, and basically, yeah, it's just very easy in that regard. Its top forward speed is where it is let down, and it is the mobility of this tank that kind of means that you can't always use the gun how you want to, because you have 38 kilometers an hour, and the power to weight ratio isn't insane to be able to keep that speed across all of the terrain types that you come across, whether that be soft, hard, medium, whatever. It is a little bit annoying to play this tank, so it is a little bit sluggish when it comes to moving around the map. And what is also good about this tank is that the penetration that we used to have with the T69 isn't so bad with this tank, and essentially you have 248mm with the standard rounds. Now, standard rounds on this thing, of course, deal the same amount of damage. They're slightly slower, but they aren't heat ammunition, and in fact, having played this tank with full heat ammunition, I would definitely not do it again, because this tank is kind of limited if you do decide to take full heat, because what happens is that you end up essentially firing off a load of rounds. They hit a track, you only deal damage to the track instead of the actual tank behind it, because it's getting absorbed by the tracks or spaced armor, and you can end up bouncing quite a few. So I would definitely recommend taking at least a couple of clips of AP ammunition in this thing to make it work properly, because at tier 9 with 248 pen, it's more than enough for most tanks, and the heat ammunition comes in really clutch against heavily armored targets, and targets that you just basically don't want to bounce off of when you do hit that actual armor, no spaced armor and stuff like that. So given that, we'll actually swap the ammunition, there's no point in running it, and we played a few games just to see what this tank is like nowadays, given that I played it probably as one of the first ever tanks I've ever played, which wasn't a pleasant experience back in the day, as it didn't even have some of the buffs that it's had over the years. So yeah, let's see what this tank is like in game and have a quick little review and rundown of this tank, but let me know what you think before this video starts so we can have a look in the comment section afterwards. Now, we are actually going to take this video from the worst replay that we've had, because although, you know, you can have 5k, 6k damage games in this thing relatively frequently if you're a more experienced player, this tank is a little bit of a pain when it comes to dealing damage consistently in some of the games, because all it takes is a few minor mistakes to end up really being punished in this tank. And if you are using the wrong ammunition type, or you find yourself in a position where your teammates aren't able to support you on the super long reload, you can end up getting punished really quite nastily, and we're going to see that in this game. But what we do is try and make up for it by using our spotting and also dealing damage using the tracking assist damage, I guess, and helping the team out as much as we can. Now this game very quick because it is a bad result, which is why I wanted to showcase it, because not every tank is as good as you see on YouTube, and although people like to say CCs get better RNG, I think you'll find that we just upload the best games that we have and don't show ones like this one where we don't have that good kind of games that you see usually. So I want to start introducing a few more of these. Not necessarily like terrible games where we do nothing, because I mean that's just boring, but what you want to see is an actual decent review where we see what the tanks are really capable of, and I'll showcase a good game in a minute. But first off, we're going to get into this position here. I want to get a few shots of free damage if possible, and then we bounce off the E4, who then subsequently gets ammo-racked, and we waste a shell just as he gets ammo-racked, so another one down the drain. Trying to go for tracks of the 57 heavy because we don't want to maintain the rounds here, and then we bounce off the 57 heavy. So a few misplays here, and that is down to I guess it wasn't necessarily a misplay. I was going for the lower plate of the E4, it didn't pen because it must have hit the upper plate. The next round fired after he got taken out and ammo-racked, and then the third round we end up trying to go for the tracks of a player that then just goes out, which, I mean, I should have really kept hold of it or just gone for a reload from the start, and then that player YOLOs out, but because we're loading heat ammunition, we end up only tracking him. There's the case in point of using some of the AP, we would have definitely been able to pen that guy beforehand, and of course got some damage to our name rather than the critical hit and the spotted target that we've got so far. So yeah, it's kind of one of those where you have to play very well, but you also have to be quite aggressive in this thing to be able to be close enough such that you can constantly deal damage with the autoloader. Otherwise you're so far behind that when you kind of push up, your teammates will just go through opponents and really quickly remove them. Now I go for a few shots on the FE2 or FE4005 there, who actually manages to nearly snap us with an auto aim there, which I would have been relatively triggered about, but luckily he doesn't, and so we push up now, we're taking the reload, and we're going to go for about 20 seconds. And the reload on this tank is actually not awful, 26 seconds roughly to be able to deal the damage that we can deal in this tank of, 1560 in one go. But when we push up here, I'm aiming to try and get a bit of spotting damage, but also get some shots open against the 50B, and any TDs that might be sat at the back, we can maybe spot and get some more assistance. So it's all really down to all of that, and fingers crossed we can get something to work. But at this point, what I'm hoping to do is get into this location, and then maybe we can find this AVRE, who subsequently, very well aimed as he was moving and snapping the turret, manages to hit us with the skillfully aimed HE rounds that the lovely AVRE does get, dealing 500 damage to us, or 400 or somewhere in that region from not even aiming. So with that out of the way, you know, maybe I shouldn't have been there, whatever. But with the damage that we've got, we can certainly turn this into an okay game. Given that we're on 3.2k combined, it isn't awful, but when we do decide to make the push, we're going to try and push over here where maybe we can catch out some of these TDs. We find ourselves an E4 who then hits us, which is unfortunate. I was expecting probably take one hit, so I'll just try and YOLO this E4. It seems like most of their team are on the other flank. Oh, for God's sake, there's a waffle in the back. Yeah, not the greatest games, not even enabling to get 4k combined in this game, which is a pretty mediocre result. I mean, I'm sure that most people will be able to do better than that one. But you can see the kind of flaws and how if you do make like some mistakes throughout the game, it really is not a rewarding vehicle. Like you genuinely get penned every single time. The armor does not hold up because the armor model is essentially a worse 57 heavy, which we all know tier 8s can pen the T57 heavy every single time, as long as you're not trying to hit the mantlet or some ridiculously angled part of the hull armor. But yeah, it's kind of just a pretty mediocre armored vehicle, and as soon as the people actually get a hit on you, you're going to take damage. But with that replay and the more garbage result and probably the more standard result that you'll be looking at, let's have a look at another one. And that next one is of course on Pearl River, where we get to see what this tank can do in a more up close and personal fight on the flank, which hopefully we can get working quite well. Now obviously Pearl River is one of the maps that is typically played kind of poorly by a lot of people in World of Tanks, and I don't know why. I feel like maybe it's down to the fact that a lot of people try and YOLO too quick, and they're kind of overzealous in their approach to trying to move forward, and they end up just overcommitting. People get side shots into you and then you're out of the game very quickly, whereas if you play a bit more passive, I'm not talking about sitting in the spawn, I'm talking about, you know, taking the front foot, but don't just be blazing in your approach to moving forward. So what we'll do here is we're going to push up to the hill area over here on our left. Essentially the key areas on this side of the map is to secure the right hand side just next to me and in front, whilst also securing the area over to our left. Now the Panther 88 here, we try and go for a shot on the move because I don't really want to stop at this point, because if we stop we can get farmed. So I get into this location. Now we got a bit of cover other than from the you know, the sky, as we like to say, and so I decide this flank is not looking good right now, so let's try and get a little bit further away and then see how the game actually ends up going. So from here, I'm thinking, right, let's survey the situation. What's going to happen? Are they actually going to be able to deal with the Bellerophon on that side? Because if they can't deal with them, then I'm really going to get screwed. And here is the heat ammunition coming in badly again, as we bounce off the Bellerophon, surrounded by basically spaced armor everywhere. And you can see the heat ammunition screwing us over again. This is why you don't fire all premium. Obviously I didn't get the memo before playing a few games like this, and probably should have got it after the first game. But with that being said, what we can do now is just take our full reload. They can't really push without exposing a lot of their tanks, whilst we can take a full reload. We're a top tier heavy in this game, heavy being a very overstatement on what this tank is really like. But what we do here is aim slightly higher than the tracks, so you can see the actual armor there to be able to pen that guy. And we do with every single round, being a bit more careful than we typically would. And then I'm just trying to find the cupola of the Tiger II, which of course we missed. So yeah, 2,500 damage done with quite a few opponents still there. The TNH somehow hits me over the ridge, which I was very surprised about, given that it must have been a very slim shot from my point of view. But I decided to take the reload and then back up a little bit more. We don't know how the enemy team are going to go. There's still 5 tanks on this flank, and quite a few of ours have taken quite a lot of hits, with the Chrysler taking a ton. I mean, he's a one-shot for basically everyone on that flank. But with 2,500 damage done, and realizing that apparently the enemy team just don't want to actually push and overwhelm this flank, and given that they're all on a very, very low amount of hit points, we can start pushing in. And the Tiger II overcommits, allowing us to get one into the lower plate. The Panther then overcommits as well, who we only track. Must have been going for the underbelly, I guess, or the lower plate. We finish off the harder target, or at least get one shot into him, and then come up from behind into the Primo Victoria to get a bit more damage from ramming. But the game is not over. We are up by, what, 9 tanks at this point, which is good, but the game could still potentially yield a couple more shots. And when you're in a tank like this, that's where it becomes really nice, is when you can find opponents at the end of the game. People who are on your team are going to be scrambling for that damage really hard, trying to get as many shots and as many reloads in as possible, whereas you only have to reload once and then push into a position to outclip everyone and steal all that damage, mop that damage up at the end of the game. Now I'll push down this tree because we don't want to get spotted. And now granted, people can blind fire if they see it, but I mean 90% of people on this game will not blind fire. I just want to make sure that I'm far enough forward where we can actually get a few shots in to whatever actually gets spotted. And Ferdinand auto-aimed on the move. Apparently that's how you pen things. And then we hit him twice to get a couple shots of damage, and then hit him a third time to finish him off for a minuscule amount. But with that being said, we take a reload because no point having one in the shell. We want to see if we can get another clip off, and we decide to push in to find ourselves the Waffle Panzer IV, who is actually there, but we've still got 10 seconds on that reload. The 30-second reload when not using the enhanced combat rations really coming in a bit annoying here. But what we do is get up into this location. I'm hoping that I can angle myself up the slope so we can get a few shots in, and then, oh, for God's sake, the physics, oh no. We miss out on a bit of damage on the Waffle. Then we decide to pull back to try and angle ourselves. We miss that next shell, and then he goes into a position that we can't actually hit us in. Then we try and pull back, and he goes forward again. Fuming. No more damage looking like it's going to be in this game. But yeah, not a bad result, picking up 4.8 thousand combined damage, with the majority of it being actual damage. And even though we missed a ton of shells, which would have boosted up our damage in that game due to those heat rounds, FYI, please don't fire any of the heat rounds as much as I did. It is not worth it. And so yeah, a very, very interesting tank that is definitely very balanced, and I don't think is particularly overpowered, nor is it underpowered. It's just in that right kind of zone that is actually quite good if you can use it right. And obviously, I just wasn't using it right in the couple of games that we did end up playing in this game. So hopefully that gives you an overview of the T54E1, what it's capable of, and the lackluster performances that it can give you if you aren't used to playing autoloaders or aren't used to playing tanks that are slightly slower. So yeah, be interested to see your thoughts in the comment section down below, and of course join me back tomorrow for the update news for the next season, and I will see you in the next one. Goodbye.